All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for another panel. I am super excited to be here with you again for this panel. So, we have a fantastic lineup. I am once again Nick Durazio, the Director of Corporate Strategy at Inven Global, and I am about to host IGEC 2020, our online conference. Now, this is actually our very last panel for our IGEC panel series because we are hard at work creating the very first IGEC digital conference. So our conference will have all sorts of live panels. We'll have all sorts of networking, all sorts of activities, all the things that you come to grow and love. And our third year, I can't believe we've been doing this for 3 years now. The Invent Global Esports Conference is a place in which we try to up the level of discussion around esports while also helping the industry solve some of its long-waged problems. Today, we are going to be talking about esports engagement. It's a very, very hard task. How do you make an esports audience engaged? And I would like to now introduce our panelists. So, Jordan, can you please introduce yourself, give a quick rundown of your esports history, and we can move on.
Sure thing. I'm Jordan O'Hara. I'm currently a product manager at Esports One, which is an esports startup in the space. We've been around for about 3 years now. Raised a seed round of a few $1 million from investors to build some awesome data grounded products in esports. Most recently, we launched our fantasy League of Legends platform, E1 Fantasy, this past spring split for League of Legends. Looking forward to summer split starting there too. Starting out in the industry, though, my career began in corporate IT. The long story short is I realized I loved gaming. I'd always been a passionate gamer. Wanted to get into the gaming industry and dove into esports the first thing I did was, why not just start an amateur esports organization? Ended up growing that over the course of about a year and a half to 30,000 followers and had some sponsors bringing in some revenue every month. Co-founded a professional esports organization based out of Australia after that called Nuovo Gaming. And then I moved on to work at Esports One, which is where I am today.
Well, cool. Jordan, I know you may have found esports late in life, but I am glad that you are here now. It's a fantastic place to be. Moving on to someone also from my understanding that first started in a completely different career, Rachel, it is great to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm really good. I would say I started in fashion design, so I worked in luxury fashion for years. And I got really involved in the gaming and esports scene in Flushing, Queens in New York. So that's like an hour subway ride outside of the city. And as somebody that played games, but also loved fashion and apparel, felt that the quality of goods being offered and the way they were being sold, mostly at a local level, left a lot to be desired. And so about three or 4 years ago now, I went to TwitchCon, which was one of the first TwitchCons, and I realized that this smaller community of esports that I had found in New York was actually this huge international space. And about 2 years ago, we launched Ateo, which is a lifestyle clothing brand designed for gaming and esports. So I would say that while I started in traditional fashion, my esports career very much started on a local scene, which I think is very similar to a lot of people as well.
Yeah, and actually that's a very similar to many of our, I guess, esports upbringings. I started just in Arizona doing my own Smash tournaments and things like that. And someone who's also did his fair share of tournament organizing, Hental. It's very nice to have you here.
Hey, how's it going, Nick?
I'm doing good. So can you talk to us a bit about your, I guess, past, starting esports organizations in school, just to now where you are today? You've been really chasing esports for some time.
Yeah, so I started video gaming in high school. That was like when RuneScape first came out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, my parents wanted me to be a doctor because obviously they're Asian. And I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job. So I was like, maybe I should just take a chance and try esports or gaming. And after university, where I ran the organization there, I did projects like arenas for different schools, consulting, and then I also have done partnership management for one of the biggest gaming publishers in the world. I co-founded a company called Esports that brings sponsors and live events together. And now I am head of Overtime Gaming, so I'm a glorified babysitter of sorts. But I started out the team space at Sword Gaming, and I was just like, maybe I can do this myself. And I started it, and I sold my team to Overtime.
Wow. You know what? There's most people in esports can't seem to find the business end of things. How do you make money off esports? You've seemed to have cracked pretty early on that this thing you love, esports, can be made into business opportunities. That's just fantastic. Tons of experience there. And this, our last, but certainly not least, you've probably heard him lately if you've been watching Valorant or if you're just a fan of esports streamers. Daniel, how are you, man?
I'm great. Thanks, Nick. How are you doing? Congrats on your marriage. I was like,
oh, yes.
Two,
wow.
3 months ago?
That is so sweet. You're the first panelist to congratulate me on air. Wow, my wife, she's gonna love to hear this. Yes, I was I was married in quarantine. We met we were in the same building. I'm kidding. No, but we've been in a long distance relationship for the past 4 years, and she's actually from China. So we've been planning to do this immigration process for some time, and we've been working on it. And it just so happened that our immigration date was a week before the nation was shut down and you couldn't travel. So I had known about the quarantine for months ahead, because I was in China, quarantined. I thought it was weird how we were all wearing masks and gloves, but no one was out in the streets. It was very eerie. And so I knew coming back, we have like a day anyways, it was very, very stressful. So there's my story about my marriage, and now it's fantastic. So we're here in the US.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like that whole thing. The whole story that you just told is part of what I do, right?
Really?
I'm a storyteller, I'm a shoutcaster, and a lot of what I do is just little tidbits of preparation beforehand to get others to talk about their story. And I think when it comes to brand building, it's really easy to do that for other people in my case. And it was pretty hard for me to do it for myself. And I think that's the case for not everybody, but definitely there's a percentage of people that have trouble doing that. So for me, I started back in college. I founded our gaming club over at Virginia Tech, down at Virginia Tech. And then afterwards, I kind of peeled away a little bit from gaming. I worked in the government. I did cybersecurity. I did.
Everyone's had real jobs. Everyone here has real jobs except for me.
I mean, it was
crazy.
Glorified cybersecurity, but they classified it as cybersecurity. But I got my break after years of working in the amateur scene in League of Legends at Riot. So I worked at Riot for a year on the LCS. I was a host, shoutcaster, interviewer there for that. And then I had the first real opportunity of building a brand that wasn't my own with the Golden State Warriors. I was one of the management there for the Golden Guardians, so brand new LCS franchise. How did we want to be perceived?
You must have learned
all that stuff.
You must have learned tons about what it is to really speak to that fan and that consumer that isn't much like the sports fan, someone that wants competition. You must have learned tons about that.
Yeah, learned a lot of what was good. Also learned a lot of, growing pains and what not to do. So that's always a big thing here with brand building. You rarely get it right on the first try. You have a pretty good idea of what your core values are, but then building around that was pretty difficult. And so since after that, back in 2018 is when I finished that. I've been freelance shoutcasting, hosting, doing talent stuff since basically the beginning of 2019. So it's been almost a year and a half now of building my own brand, investing in myself again, like I did before Riot, but now having experience of being in the esports space.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely tell it's from a different footing of like solid foundation that you're coming into this approach. And it shows your production quality is better than all of ours. So
That's just more of a work thing. That's
Oh, yeah.
Mastering is
my
craft.
production quality is going to be.
By the way, I
I need this for later
I do
today.
want
I'm
to
still
give
later today.
a shout outs to HyperX, our sponsors. You actually hook us up really, really well. These headphones, the mic, I love this mic. It is no shame. I'm just saying I clearly need a better camera now. So, anyways, so guys, thank you all for being here. I think now it's very clear why we've set you up for this panel. You guys have been trying to gather the audience, the attention, the love, the engagement, or just the interest of esports fans for some time now. So let's just get into probably the first and most obvious question. What are some of the tenets? What is the thing that you must do, or then what is the thing that you should never do when you're trying to engage with a gaming or a competitive audience? And I'll open this up to who'd ever like to start.
Sure, I'll take the first one.
All right.
So, in my opinion, for gamers, they're very picky. Every gamer likes certain products. Every gamer likes certain brands, and they associate certain things with these brands. And to actually be able to figure out what everybody likes, I think that's probably the key. And finding your voice as a person or a brand within this space about which audience you're actually trying to target and who you're trying to speak to is very important. Because for example, a lot of my audience is mainly Fortnite kids from 14 to 16, and they're not going to watch PUBG, they're not going to watch Valorant,
Yeah.
They don't understand Counter-Strike. So for them, you have to speak their language, which might be simple English.
That's so interesting to think of someone who doesn't understand Counter-Strike. And I only say that because that was a formative game for me. That's like trying to wrap your head around someone who doesn't understand that Super Mario is like a little platformer guy, right? It must be.
Yeah.
You must really step out of yourself.
I think
Yeah.
to that, I think one of the most important things is to listen. And I think that prior to launching Ateo, we spent a lot of time making sweatshirts on home sewing machines and bringing them to gamers in cafes and having them try the product. And I think you have to kind of check your ego and be willing to be wrong to be able to make the right decision. And I think that humans like being listened to, and I think that esports and gaming audience in particular, they love being involved in the process. They're very familiar with that in regards to beta launches of games, etc. So I think that listening and kind of engaging with them is very, very important. I think it also then becomes a huge business advantage.
By the way, shout outs to Ateo. I absolutely love my hoodie. That thing is just so comfortable. I don't know if it's because you've listened to tons of gamers who are just like me, but there's just something about having my wrist feel all tight and protected. It's just nice, right? I just like the product.
Thanks. We love a free commercial whenever.
So, Jordan, what do you think?
Gosh, I definitely would agree with the point that Hantao was going for, where you really need to determine the audience that you're going for, that you're targeting. So on our side, again, we launched a fantasy League of Legends platform. So the tone of content or social posts we'll be putting out probably would be a lot different from what Hantao might be doing with Fortnite kids, right? Who's going to be playing fantasy League of Legends? It's probably going to be someone that knows League of Legends already, someone that's been playing League of Legends for a while, actively following the esports scene. They're probably
Deep
going to care more
within
maybe about
the nerddom.
Yeah, right.
This is someone who knows esports, yes.
It's people that care about the professional scene, so you're going to want to focus on storylines between players throughout a season, and also really, but not just storylines, because we're a fantasy platform. We really like all of our content and kind of social to have data really at the core of it.
Yeah.
So it's storylines between these players really supported by data is what we have found helps us kind of hit our core audience.
So just quick show of hands, and then Daniel, I'd love to hear from you with this. Who has played fantasy before, either for sports or really? Oh wow, I'm the only one who hasn't. Okay, so I think maybe that's something. Maybe I represent the gamer because I'm actually very interested in this concept, right? Like I've actually been really kind of poking around, seeing how I could maybe play this myself, because I know a lot about esports and I love it, but I've never played fantasy before. So maybe we're gonna have to talk later. You can sample me and see what like resistance I'm having to try fantasy from an esports perspective. Anyways, Daniel, what is the one thing you think you need to know?
Well, and everyone's hit on it, but the way that I would encapsulate it is authenticity.
Yeah.
So spending the time, because right now everyone's talked about, oh, well, who are you targeting? How are you targeting them? Even before that step, and everyone did it. I know all three of you did it with your brands. It's what am I? Who am I? Like figuring that out first and digging into that. So for example, for Esports One, were you Wikipedia? Were you a media house? Were you a content house? You are to me, in my mind, the way I think of Esports One is it's a fantasy platform for people that like data. If you like to drive things through data, we're here for you. And that to me makes sense. So when you go through that process of, well, what am I selling? It's even before that. It's what am I? Like, what am I first? And then maybe I will be able to find others that flock to that because of what I truly believe in. Because no matter what, your audience will always sniff out something that isn't true, that doesn't feel true, that doesn't feel authentic.
I'm so glad you said that. It is a trope of anyone who's been in a meeting with me or has heard me. I always say that esports audiences are the most critical audience I have ever worked with, ever. Like, esports audiences love to point out when you're being fake. You can be wrong, you can be bold, you can be arrogant. It's fine in esports, but if you are trying to pretend that you love this stuff more than... And why do you think that is? Because I really do think that's a true tenet of the esports fan.
I would imagine that it has something to do maybe with the kind of the culture around gaming and esports in its earlier days, where it was more frowned upon. Being a gamer, let alone being a professional gamer back then, you're not you're not going to be pulling thousands of viewers on a Twitch stream in those days, for something like that necessarily. But like, so these, people got used to, maybe being talked down to or kind of judged, and so it's kind of maybe a defensive mechanism or a wall that's been thrown up. Like when we see these non-endemic brands coming into the space, like we kind of want to sanity check them and make sure they're kind of accepting our culture that we've developed in this industry.
I love when these panels get real deep, because that's so true. There's an esports audience that's hurting.
I think it's also due to accessibility, because we work in such a digital space, and how easy it is for viewers and audience to actually see like how different everybody is and what's out there, and how easy it is even for content producers and creators to be able to push out their content to the different platforms. People are able to see what they like and what they don't like.
Yes, what they don't like too. And the thing is, they get so used to seeing what they like all the time. Just one instance of something they don't like is like, what is this even doing here? Who are you? How dare you? Because man, some of the articles I've written in the past get so much flamed, and I'm like reasonably, I feel as if you can't hate this very mild thing that I'm writing about that much. But when content is this curated, it's easy to get real strong opinions on that stuff.
When it comes,
please.
Adding on, I think there's a desire to protect the space, and that maybe a new or different opinion is going to take advantage or harm the space, and this like special space created. And as someone that played games but wasn't until 4 years ago like involved in esports, let's call it competitive games or whatever you call it, there was a lot of like, what are you doing here? Like, how come you're here? And I think there's many of reasons that happens, but I think that that if you are authentic, which is very often overused, and really kind of true to what you are saying and like what you set out to do, and if you listened, then it works itself out in a sense. But I think the audience feels a desire to kind of protect and becomes like exclusive in a sense.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I'm sorry, Daniel, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think games itself lend itself to truth. You can't lie that you
Yeah.
beat a level, like way, let's start way back in Mario. It's like, hey, if you mistimed your jump, you died. There's no gray.
Yes.
It's very binary,
You're
right?
good
It's
or
like
you're
you did it
bad.
or you didn't do it.
Yeah,
And
get good or yeah.
having that be like the pedigree on how you grow is how a lot of our viewers think. Like in Fortnite, you either get the victory royale or you didn't.
That is
You
such a
can't really
good way
lie
to
about
look at
that.
it. You're
So it's very
yeah.
result based.
That's very true. I mean, I too, as someone who has come from a very almost stereotypical esports upbringing, just a kid who loved arcades, and all of a sudden, competitive gaming is a thing. All of a sudden, this thing I loved is not competitive. Now that I think about it, a lot of how I viewed the world was like, if you're bad, don't even talk to me. Like, I viewed myself as I'm good because I'm good at this game. That's the one thing I know. It's the one thing I relate with. That's really interesting. You guys have to deal with this lot. You guys are the ones that have to engage with this audience and have to make this audience feel safe and heard, or I guess respected enough to buy your product or follow you or like you or listen to you. So, I mean, I feel as I'm going through a personal therapy session right now, but how do you then talk to an esports fan? How do you get them to trust you? Because maybe you aren't just some grip. Because, the thing is, too, esports audiences remember all of the times esports was tried to thrown into the limelight and then failed, right? We've seen the ups and downs. So I think that's what Rachel said about the protective part of it, too. So how do you guys engage with this audience? I mean, really, that's the meat and bones of this panel. What are some things you guys have done that have worked that you think makes esports audiences feel heard?
It's good. I'm super excited to hear what you guys have to say. 'Cause this is the good stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
Time for the secrets, guys.
We love talking to our customers, or our community, as we call them.
Yeah.
So I'd say every week we talk to 10 to 15 people for 15 minutes at a time or more, and basically ask them how they're doing, what products they like, what they don't like. We ask for feedback, and I think that versus just putting out a tweet and expecting someone to engage and give you some sort of valuable feedback, I think it's very different than when you actually reach out to an individual person and want to hear what they have to say. And we care really deeply about the people that buy our products, love our products, and they're going to hopefully keep them for the rest of their life and buy them again. It's not this resale cycle of very trendy. So we really believe in building these relationships with people because it feels like, as a brand, the right thing to do, and also as a company that tries to push innovation, a really helpful tool in furthering our products as well.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
Rachel,
you go ahead, Jordan.
All right. I was going to say, Rachel, you've talked a lot about listening to whether it's your customers, your users, community, and I just hard agree with that, because from my end as a product manager and someone that works with engineers to build products that are pushed out and people use, listening to users is literally the most important part of my job. And not just listening to users, right, but giving the user a way to have visibility into what you're doing, and then be able to comment about that visibility and discuss what you're showing them you're working on with you, providing feedback, and actually responding to that feedback. Like you were saying, Rachel, hopping on calls with them. We have a Discord community that we created very early on in Esports One's life cycle. That's 1,300 to 1,500 something members. That's very active, and so it's we have places for them to see our product roadmap and comment on it and suggest features, and we're very active in commenting back with them on those boards, talking with them about features in Discord, highlighting features we're going to be releasing early specifically to our Discord community to continue growing the community and getting people in there. So yeah, to me it's really listening to users, making them feel heard as well, and then actually showing them that you're doing what you've been talking to them about.
Yeah, I feel as if that kind of stumbled into a fantastic question. I'd like to open it up to everyone, because I think everyone can relate to something they've done personally. This is I know if you're trying to communicate to an esports audience, this is something that's important. So have you guys Daniel, Hantal, have you guys experienced something like that when trying to reach esports people?
Experienced what? Sorry.
What type of trait or what type of thing have you noticed works when you're trying to get esports people on board with pretty much anything you're trying to do?
I think it's just, as one of the previous panelists mentioned, being authentic, because at the end of the day, your audience just wants to be treated like people and not a fan of your product. If you just, answer that one DM where they're like, oh, wow, I love your product, or like just have a normal conversation with them and they feel like they're fulfilled and noticed by you, it helps a long way in building like their loyalty, and they're wanting to like not just be your fan, but also be a friend as well.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cool. I was thinking about it when we saw the panel. I was like, the three of you guys are building a brand. My brand is me, so I'm building me a little bit. So how do what am I selling to other people that they would want? Because they're not buying it. It's just support. And so what I've found works for me after going inward and being authentic in what I do is doing something that is opinionated enough so that those that follow that opinion or disagree with that opinion are polarized by it, right? So you either you push them away so hard that they want to tell you how much they don't like it, or you hit the nail on the head so much they want to tell you that they like it.
That is
that's kind of like been the thing. Otherwise you kind of get lost in a lot of the noise that everyone else is doing, because there are other fantasy platforms out there that got funding by Mark Cuban. There are other streetwear companies that are trying to get in esports. There are other, Asian American talent, Latin American talent that, are out there. So I think for me, it's been like, hey, I'm not pushing anyone down, but I'm not afraid of ruffling feathers in speaking my truth.
Well, I actually think that speaks to a lot of truth about what you need to be when you're in the public eye and you're a streamer or you're someone that people follow, right? It's crazy that we use that term sometimes, followers. It's like, okay, like don't follow me, right? It's kind of weird. But when you're in that position, I don't think people expect you to say something. People expect you to, all right, this happened. What are you doing with your platform, right? Because if you're just so wishy-washy, it's like, so why am I looking at your tweets? Because I'm trying to filter out the noise. So yeah, I think that's true. Taken in the opposite direction, we all know that there is a part of the esports fandom that seems to just thrive on chaos, right? That love memes and they love to troll you at every turn, and to them the esports environment is a playground. And will always be this group of people trying to take it too seriously. What would you say to that type of esports fan? And do you even try reasoning with them, or is it just too far off?
Are you referring to the fan that takes esports seriously?
So
we're going at?
So I'd say it's the esports fan that are attracted to the memes of it, and they're like attracted to how funny it is that maybe some of the top streamers are like incredible trolls, and they find themselves in these tournaments and, oh look, like, isn't it funny that this player's playing in the league? Like, I think that's a real appeal of esports, these larger than life personalities. And I'm just curious if you guys have had any experience either working with one of those types of influencers or trying to channel some of that Twitch chat of energy that is a very real part of what it is to be authentic in esports.
I think that when we pick influencers, or let's call them influencers, we try to, our first quality is that they're like good people. Figure out what that means, but that's really important to us. Not how many followers they have. And I think that in regards to the audience that likes memes and wants to be trolls, we try to use it to our advantage. We make the content we want to make, and if you hate it so much that it gets to the top of a subreddit, like, I don't really care. That gets clicks to our website, and the majority of people really like it. I think the only time that fan has left us personally kind of feeling pretty helpless was we did a big push around women's wear, and it felt like something really important we had done, and it was targeted by people that I guess didn't like the look of all the individuals in the video, and that felt like we had to protect people in a sense. Other than that, we try to use the memes to our advantage. If someone wants to take a clip from our content and make a GIF out of it or spread it in some Discord, it works for us. So I think we've tried to include that fan because they are part of the culture.
Yeah.
And then when it gets, there is a line where it's too mean, and then we kind of stop engaging.
Yeah, and it's good that you would bring that up because there is a disproportionate amount of that trolling that goes towards women, that goes towards women in esports, especially women who aspire to be pro players themselves, right? The amount of attention and the amount of internet, what's the word? I guess a spectacle that's made of it is huge, and it's a completely different beast trying to deal with that while still being a professional brand, while still having to recover from this. It's a very difficult problem. Have anyone had experience, I guess, to open up? Has anyone else had to deal with something like that? Like some esports blowback when things don't go right and you've done something wrong. I mean, what do you do?
For social media, the whole point of it is to be social. And I think at the end of the day, your job as a social media manager or whatever, if you get the clicks, if people comment, if you get engagement, your job is already done, right? You've already have their attention, and that's when you can flip the switch and be like, here's how we can turn the haters into our hardcore audience.
Yeah. It's true. It's definitely a double-edged sword. I know that in my career, I've often liked to call it games writing because, to be frank, a lot of the early stuff wasn't necessarily journalism. Like a lot of us who were writers, we wrote patch notes and we wrote game strategy, right? So a lot of people come from that background. And one of the things that I've noticed is the esports community, they really, really appreciate when all is said and done, you try to keep it about the game, right? If you try to at least bring it back to the fact that, hey, I love esports, I love gaming, this is what I tried to do. From my opinion, that's usually how you can get out of most situations when they turn against you. Then again, it is a completely different story when you're writing news because some people have a vested interest in the story and you don't know if the haters are zone. So man, esports a PR, that's a whole nother panel that would I'm sure there'd be plenty of stories for that. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, kind of back on topic, a lot of us has talked about being authentic and a lot of us have talked about how important that is. But that can be really hard, and it can be really, really difficult when your version of yourself that is authentic, you almost know there's going to be haters, or there's going to be blowback, or maybe that's just going to be a fear of yours. So, how have you guys personally found that voice, personally found the ability to be authentic when it's very, very easy to get into this mindset of I'll do anything for views and I'll change myself? How do you guys deal with that pressure?
For me, I think it's knowing what the alternative is and seeing examples of what that alternative is, whether it was previous versions of me, in the past where me working in the office, there was a point in my life where I was six figures. Everyone around me has a mortgage, or they're saving to pay off their own college loans, or they're saving to pay off their kids' loans. And life was there. I saw a life that was just, it wasn't authentic. It wasn't me. At that time in my life, I knew this is where I wanted to be at this moment, but I knew on that path that I was at, it wasn't there. So having a reminder of what the alternative is very helpful because hey, look, I've now identified what works for me, what is my truth. And so I've also seen an example of how unhappy I could have possibly have been if I didn't stick to that. And if I deviate even now, I already know what could possibly happen in being stuck, surrounded by things that are important to other people but aren't important to me, and unhappy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of the few ways I use like a negative thing as a motivator. But
No, yeah.
again, it doesn't hurt anybody else. It's selfish to me.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you have a very, very clear kind of compass that points you in the right direction because you know what would happen if you're not true to yourself. I mean, yeah, I think that takes a lot of willpower, to be honest. I think if you're someone who I think can muscle up the like ability to, because you know you need to speak truth to yourself. You need to like know who you are. That comes from a lot of experience, I think.
Is that too specific just for me, guys? Like where I'm like, hey, look, like I know what the negative thing is, and I can extrapolate it out. So yes, it was a whole career change, and that prevented me from the negative thing. But maybe if I start view botting, that same negative thing could come happening, or like bad things would happen. I have to go back to that kind of life. Like I don't know what other negative routes I could end up taking, but I know this is one of the results that could happen if I take a negative route. Am I the only one that thinks that way?
So to build on what Digon said, you know, I think throughout life you have all these different opportunities and experiences that you take, and the only thing that you actually find out through all of these experiences is like what you don't like, right? You find, oh, I don't like working in office 9 to 5. I don't like, you know, working at a desk job. I do like traveling, stuff like that. And it's just all these different experiences that you find and you like or dislike. For example, with PewDiePie, everybody knows him at the start because he did horror games, and everybody was just like, oh, I want PewDiePie to be scared, right? And he couldn't sustain that, and he was like, oh, I don't like doing YouTube, I don't want to do this anymore. And his fans didn't like him or switching to different things. But now, you know, he's doing something that he likes, and his fans watch him still for that. So it's about like, if you can't be true to yourself about what you like or dislike and finding your own like a voice, then how can other people support that?
Yeah, that's so true. I think a lot of times it's, especially in esports, I see it a lot with the pro players. They're happier when they're playing the game they love, right? Like it's a very, very different thing when you join a league or an esport because it's the new hot game. It's the prize pool you need, right? But long term, sustaining, it is very important to, you know, do what you love. And I actually think you've hit upon a common thread that really brings esports audiences together. To most people who consume esports, I would view it as like an escape, right? It's definitely way cooler than their real life, right? When they play, it's not on the front stage of this big thing, and it's not for high stakes. They're just a gamer. Or at least that's how it was for me. And I know that I still feel like it's a dream job to work in esports. Because I have also had that path where I could be doing something very boring, and I see it, but no, I choose to keep being this forever kid, and I really love esports. So I think maybe that too speaks a bit about the type of consumer that we're dealing with when we're trying to elicit some sort of engagement from esports audiences. Daniel, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was curious on like on Jordan's product here on authenticity and how you guys deal with, I guess, shortcuts or possible shortcuts. What are some of the cost analysis, you know, or maybe it's like the
define shortcuts out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Or no, sorry, no. What do you mean by shortcuts out of curiosity?
Yeah. Oh, so like if there was investment that would say, hey, look, we'd love to buy you, or we'd love to invest in this, but we want you to do this kind of a product, and it doesn't quite. Maybe it's kind of there. Maybe it's like 70% there, but you're like, I don't know about it. What are some of the moral crises that you face when protecting your brand from those types of things?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it can be rough. But so we have a big announcement coming out next week about some partners, which I can't speak to yet. But whenever we're evaluating a partner, and that could be a partner for, you know, marketing, user acquisition purposes or something, or like you were touching on investment, whether we're straight up trying to raise a round of funding from investors, or you know, there obviously are also partners that will that aren't, you know, classical investors that will put money into you. Really finding alignment between us and them, and like making sure that they are bought into our vision as a startup is critical, because when you're talking about money and you're talking about investment, money doesn't usually come without strings attached to it, to in some form, right? We're very careful about making promises when we partner with someone or taking investment from someone. I don't think we've ever I can't think of a time we've ever taken investment from someone and then said yes, and we'll build this for you in return, right?
Yeah.
That's not so much how it works. This is our vision, and then when we're going out to raise funding, it's like, this is our vision, this is what the plan is, this is why we need your money, and this is how we're going to use it.
Yeah.
And then either they buy into our vision as a startup, or it doesn't happen so much.
So there's an interesting, I guess, future possibility is we're talking about the esports consumer and all this, but that's a pretty narrow definition of who consumes esports, and that is actually getting bigger and bigger. Who consumes esports? Esports is becoming way more mainstream, and I think that really is changing a lot of things. There was this time where many of us would have to chase the same, 18 to 27-year-old male with games and esports, but now that there are so many more women, there are so many more people from all ages, especially youth. Kids are getting way more into mobile games, especially esports nowadays. I've spoken to the high schools. It's insane how many kids play games. So I think there's also ways in which you guys have to be thinking about, how do we make this mainstream? How do we go after them? Because, bottom line, our job is to get engagement. We want to get an audience. So what are some ways do you think that esports can maybe learn from the past, or maybe learn from other industries? I know you guys come from Rachel comes from a whole different world from, of esports, and I'm sure that industry tackles with these very similar problems. So do you guys have any ideas?
I think so. I can speak to fashion. I think working in fashion, both for the founder and myself, felt that it was the world that exists felt pretty outdated.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like it hadn't evolved, and it feels like it still has a long way to go. And it's built on these morals that changing the status quo is not as good.
Yeah.
I think that we have seen a lot of really interesting innovation around fashion. Let's take a step away from esports for now. And then kind of the establishment of the fashion industry doesn't like that or support that.
Yeah.
I think that for us, we always try to kind of engage what you would consider the core esports audience. We've been around now 2 years, and we have a really large audience of females that follow esports. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. I think there's probably an appeal in that we're a female-founded company and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But we've also been really thoughtful about the kind of talent we engage with and what their audiences look like. And I would say the way we kind of look at it is, growing beyond esports is that basically everyone will become a fan of games and esports. Like, it's just a matter of time. I think this kind of pandemic has shown that, like, the times are going to change, and they're going to change really quickly.
Yeah.
I think that for us, we've always had this premise that we design clothes that are meant for you to sit at a computer or at a console, and that in the future, everyone will, or a large majority of people will work at a computer remote. And so we're designing clothing for the future. And so while we started, if we could make a product that was exceptional for a pro player at TI, that's awesome, but that also works for a software engineer working from home.
Yeah.
So work at their starting place and be really authentic to that audience. But in making a product that was exceptional for a pro player, we knew that it kind of had applications outside of.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's a great pivot just in terms of like the mindset of the product and the philosophy. Like, yeah, what a really invigorating way to keep the dream alive and like make it even bigger. That's so cool. I'm gonna want a full set of like a Teo kitchenware, because it's designed for me to cook, and like the sleeves would never get wet. They'd be plastic. All these nice things. Some pretty good ideas.
Don't cook.
Well, I had to learn how to cook. Last night I learned how to make fried rice. Whoa, big steps here.
Feeling it.
Yeah.
Paradigm shift.
Yeah,
I recently learned how to boil an egg, so I feel you.
Really? Yeah, gamers unite.
So I think esports is already mainstream in
Yep.
gaming.
Yep.
If anything, I think it should actually slow down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because there are a lot of investment dollars in this scene, and everybody's rushing to try to be part of it rather than to build a sustainable business. They just want the, oh, look, I'm in gaming, I'm so cool factor, rather
Yeah.
than like, hey, is this actually going to work? Is this going to be something long term?
Yes, you
Because
need real
there's so many
businesses.
leagues and other teams or businesses that, you know, they're driven purely on investment, and it's like, when is this gonna fail, and how do you make sure that this is gonna last for the next 10 years rather than
Yep.
the next 5?
Wow, I feel like I'm in a boardroom meeting right now, because that's pretty much what that's what every like realist is saying about a lot of esports orgs too. I mean, it's kind of industry talk, and pretty much everyone knows a lot of big esports orgs got their funding about 3 to 4 years ago, so they're running out. Like they're burned dry, and a lot of these companies, they haven't really established these revenue models. Now a lot of people are playing catch up. It's a lot of postmortems trying to figure out why, because we say, hey, look, there's another wave of interest in esports, and it's because of just the raw numbers. People are inside. Like mobile game usage is still skyrocketing, and I think a lot of people are trying to look at engagement, which is exactly why we're having this panel. Because if you actually look at the amount of money your average esports fan pays, like every time they like successfully like interact, I think it's on average they spend about $5.46. Whereas if you compare it to traditional sports, it's around $80, right? So a lot of these business models were aiming at that type of fan rabid passion, which you got. But esports audiences and online audiences, we've got a lot of free content for the majority of this entire industry. Like, we're not paying for things, and you can't pay for esports after you finish paying for the game, right? That is something that still is one of the hardest parts of this industry. Do you guys see that as something that's on the decline, or do you have any ways in which you personally try to convince an esports audience that no, maybe you should spend your money on things that are quality in esports? How do you guys even do that?
I feel like that's kind of the thesis of my everyday. I mean, 2 years ago, no one was selling a zip up for $88 in the space. I think now Team Birch has definitely decided to kind of up their prices. But what we were launching, we decided this is the best zip up you're going to game in. It's meant for you to game in, and you should spend $88. I think it was a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. Once people started wearing the product and talking about it, I think it became pretty clear that you got value for what you spent, and the product was going to last you, and it would be your favorite product. And I think as we engage with customers, I think one of the things we hear so often is, I was hesitant to buy, but I heard these sitters were amazing, or I heard the zip up was the best product ever. And a lot of times they buy one pair of sitters, and they're like, I buy a 3-pack at Walmart for $20, your sitters for $65. And now I've ordered 3 more pairs. So I think our goal is to kind of explain that, like, this is valuable, like it costs money to make things, and our products will last you, and they're good products. I think that the audience, particularly in regards to apparel, has learned to spend more. I don't think that high price tags always mean quality in this space yet, but I think that has been our goal from the beginning, was to be a sustainable business, and we had to, just the reality to exist. And so I think that really kind of tapping into our really core audience and making sure they loved what they had, and maybe they would tell a friend, has worked for us. And kind of, I think, a lot to the point of like scaling at a thoughtful pace as opposed to like as fast as possible. I mean, we don't sell 100,000 zip-ups tomorrow. We expect to sell more than we did last month. And so I think that's really important in kind of scaling the business.
So true.
Yeah, that I think there's so much truth there, because I've been burned by a price tag that was not worth what I got. You know, it was like, oh, I bought hype. What do I do with this? It's true. Not worth it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it makes sense that if there was a space, because I think you're right. I have seen too, and also both in my work and just being around esports, people take esports apparel more seriously now, like in terms of quality and spending. It's not cool to just wear an esports a Gildan T-shirt. It's like, oh, okay, like nice piece of apparel there. Whereas I literally remember there was a time where it was very cool to wear a Gildan like MLG shirt. I remember that the first clothing and fashion that really gave esports people an identity was horrible quality. It was not even close, and it was just it dressed us for so long. So all those shirts and all of that convention wear, we really have gone a long way there. But I think that there's some things like content, for example, that is very hard to make work in esports. We have some of the biggest stars in the world competing for your $9 a month. It's either Netflix or this esports podcast, or Netflix or this esports news site, right? I work in content, and there's been so many ways, so many attempts to do this, and still, we're not quite there. I will say I would look towards the Magic the Gathering community, because that community has been around on the internet with content much longer. Look at a site like Star City Games. They have premium content, and they have had for years and years and years. There are paid Magic the Gathering writers that you can only read if you pay for the subscription. So they've been doing it though for a long time. So I think Rachel's point is true, that you need to just say that you're going to do something, you're going to make it a business, and you have to have enough something to weather the storm.
Yeah, it needs to be more than just a year or even 2 years kind of idea, which is why I think I latched onto Rachel's idea of, we're not just a product for now, the gamer now, but also a product that can transition for the future.
Yeah.
And the way that was described and the way that it was built, in terms of storytelling, makes sense to me from both sides, as the producer and as the consumer. That is so smart. And I think a lot of the time people come in with maybe a 1 to 3 year plan, and that's usually not long enough to figure it out.
And
it's not long enough to get the equity from the consumer. It's
going to change too. And so this has now become the Rachel Has Very Good Ideas panel. In this, we learn about business development from Rachel. So Rachel, no, but seriously though, it was a very good point. One thing I think is important to note, that kind of the elephant in the room obviously is COVID, and when it comes to esports and gaming, it has been an opportunity. There are other industries who are leveled by this, and it is horrible, and there are other industries that simply cannot survive. Some of our favorite restaurateurs, we've all had friends, it's very tough. And yet the fact remains that I think the only thing that the fastest rising industry was online groceries. The second fastest was gaming. So gaming really did replace, with the core chunk of the entertainment consumer product there in a lot of people. So how do you guys try to pivot from that? What are some of the silver lining? What have you guys been able to do, or maybe what have you seen increase now that the world's eyes is on esports and gaming as one of the economies that maybe doesn't collapse, that maybe does good, that maybe somehow benefits from this?
One thing that was fun at Esports One that we did during the pandemic, so as the operator of a fantasy League of Legends platform, obviously that's a very season-based experience. You have your on-season, we launched this past spring season, and then obviously we're in off-season right now, leading into the start of summer split, which is a couple weeks from now. And so a very interesting thing for us was what do we do to engage people during off-season? And so we tackled that through a couple different ways. So on top of our Fantasy League of Legends platform, the product that I product manage is a Discord bot that's integrated with our Fantasy League of Legends platform that allows gamers that are hanging out in the Discord community with their friends to kind of do things around Fantasy League of Legends in Discord. You know, they can play a mock Fantasy League of Legends. They can make predictions about what will happen next season.
And there's plenty more people hanging out in Discord channels.
Right, and then it's sparking this engagement there, and then driving people back to the site, because there's of course click-throughs back to the site. So it's using so it's being creative, but then also we were like, oh, there's no real League of Legends events going on right now. We'll just do our own. So we ran a community League of Legends tournament that also had a fantasy aspect to it. So members of our community that played fantasy last season could be the players in this tournament, and then new users would be coming in and making fantasy lineups of them and watching them.
That's pretty fun.
Which was just like really fun, and I don't think that we would have gotten, honestly, as many participants or viewers, without COVID when we ran that, honestly.
Yeah. Have you guys had anything that has worked? I think it's been it's been about, like 58 days? I think I saw the number since like the official, I guess, lockdown.
I was going to say, that's a very specific about.
Yeah, I swear I just read it. Maybe I'm going nuts. Daniel, have you seen anything turn good from this?
So I was gonna go to Poland for the PUBG Mobile Pro League, and that got canceled, obviously. So that was a downer. But to see the way that specific gaming community has kind of rallied around the online tournaments now, and a desire to still have the same level of storytelling of their community has been there, as well as the rise of Valorant's community as well. We were talking about it earlier. It's a brand new community, so it feels like it was the Wild West, but not as scary as the Wild West, where people are just creating, doing funny things. It's almost like a safe space for people to be curious and discover again. And so that to me was a space where I got to. It wasn't always shoutcast. Like, I actually kind of did like a home team broadcast of my buddy's ranked games, and he's never played
so cool.
A first-person shooter before. So I got us, our friends, random people on the internet. I got rated on Twitch with people. I was like, hey, we're here with Team Elias, and we're cheering on Elias, throughout his 5 placement matches to see how high he got. And that was such a cool moment.
That is very cool.
All these people kind of gather around and cheer on somebody that they didn't know. So like there was a desire to feel like part of a community because social distancing happened. And I think along the way we realized physical distancing doesn't mean social distancing.
Yes. I mean, that's so true. I would just say that Animal Crossing has strangely saved my social life. I'm a very social person. I visit my friends on Animal Crossing all the time. It's so weird, but just, hanging out at their space, it's just a thing. And I think a lot of people have realized that gaming, can replace that. There's a need to connect with people. I guess we have time for Hentao. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah. So I think the coolest thing is how adaptable this industry has been for what's happening. Because, working in technology and online, something always goes wrong.
Yep.
There's always fires to put out every single day, no matter what you're doing. And it's cool seeing how adaptable everybody is in like, oh, let's do this instead of this because we can't do this because of COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like how adaptable, how creative everybody in this industry has been throughout this time. I think it's really cool to see.
That is true. And Rachel, have you seen anything positive on your end?
Yeah, I think that I agree with everything about the kind of esports and gaming space. For us, when everything shut down, we do all of our production in Los Angeles or within 20 miles of Los Angeles. And we watched as every vendor we work with was completely out of work. So our factory had no work for 3 months. They're not allowed to work. What happens to all our sewers and things like that? And I think a lot of times fashion doesn't do such a good job of talking about who makes your clothes and what their life looks like. And so when this happened, we felt a lot of responsibility to kind of give these people business still. And so we launched like supply drops, which you have been pushed to do had COVID not occurred. And the idea was that we could bring joy to our customers, but also spend money with these vendors. And so work that they could potentially do from their home as opposed to a factory. So kind of turn a sewer into a valuable resource when they're not at a sewing machine.
Yeah.
things like that have been really important to us to kind of give back to our community, and also hopefully they have work soon and safely work.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? I'd say that goes to everyone who worked at the esports arenas and who were to work at the locals, especially tournament organizers. I know the fighting game scene is having a hard time now because so much of their stuff was in person. But yeah, I think that there is a lot that us individuals can do, right? And I think just trying to give back is a fantastic way to. Wow, and this panel, I can't believe we have been talking for nearly an hour. I always have so much fun, and I feel like I learned so much. God, this topic starts off so small, but then you start realizing that to engage with an esports fan, you're engaging with a human being, right? So it gets pretty complicated. It's hard to really get them to, join your trust, to do all of that, to buy your product, and I've learned a lot. So with that said, you can follow all of InVen Global's content at InVen Global. You can follow me, your host, at Nick Durazio3RD. You can follow Dgon at exactly what it is, at DGON. You can follow Hantao at Hantao, Hantao. I really hope that I've been saying that correctly. I feel like, okay, good. Good. I'm so sorry. I'm just so bad at names. You all heard it before, but I hope that story stays between us. Daniel, that was, oh boy, before the call. Anyways, you can find Rachel at Rachel Lipstick. So that's RACHELL IP stick. That was the hardest way to spell that. And then you can find Jordan at O'Harabiz. So OHARABIZ for anyone just listening. So this has been a super cool panel, guys. Do you have any last words for your fans and people listening?
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Nick, thanks for having me on. This was a really awesome experience, and most of you, Hantao, we've spoken a couple of times very briefly in the past, but it's been great meeting all of you as well. Lots of fun.
Cool.
Yeah. Be kind to your neighbor. It's crazy out there, so make sure you're always spreading good as much as you can.
Yep, I agree. And
Thanks
Rachel,
for hosting, Nick.
I was like, say something nice.
I think it was great. Thank you. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
People in really different spaces within gaming and esports.
I agree. Wow. Well, thank you guys for coming. This has been another InVen Global Esports Conference panel. Check out invenglobal.com for more announcements on when our conference will go live. So everyone here is invited. You're all invited. It's going to be awesome. Stay tuned for that more news. Anyways, my name is Nick Durazio, and we are out. Talk to you later.